Leif Erikson. "Watch out for that iceberg!" Eric the Red shouted the order from the rowers. Exiled from Iceland, he was searching for a new home for his family. Young Leif, his son, kept staring at the huge iceberg while they slowly and carefully rowed past it in their Viking ship. Soon the fjord opened up, and Leif could see Greenland, grassland both to the right and left. The men stopped rowing, and the ship gently grounded on the beach. They all went ashore. For the first 3 years, they lived in seclusion. There were no other inhabitants around, and they focused on the family and environment, learning and taking care of their new land. After 3 years, Eric the Red returned to Iceland and told of the bounty that he had found in the new lands to the west, the land he named Greenland. Stimulated and excited by his tales, hundreds of people packed up their families and belongings and followed him to their new home. Leif grew to be a large man, one known for his fair judgment and honesty. Having been reared under his father's adventurous hand, Leif had a strong urge to travel and explore. One of his first trips was eastward to Norway, the homeland of his family. He arrived and was well received by King Olaf. Leif and his men stayed there for the winter and were taught the foundations of Christianity. Some years before AD 1000, another Viking relayed exciting news of a new land to the west. Leif, an adventurer in his own right, brought a ship, gathered a crew of 35, and sailed westward. With favorable weather and winds, Leif and his crew were soon following the outlines of the new lands that they'd heard of. They continued onward, stopping only briefly at 2 other lands until they reached the third new land. Vinland is good. There, they came ashore and had forests to provide wood for their homes and their boats. They found their winter to be frost-free, and they agreed they had plenty of grass to feed the animals. Also, the rivers and lakes were filled with salmon and a large variety of other fish. And the earth, it seemed to be black and rich, where they could easily grow their crops. And there were groups of grapevines everywhere. So pleased was Leif by the bountiful land that he named it Vinland. In the spring, Leif and his men returned to Greenland. There were native attacks and found better trade to Europe. On his return journey, Leif came upon a wrecked trading vessel whose crew he rescued. For this deed, he received the entire rich cargo and was nicknamed Leif the Lucky.
Christopher Columbus. Biography. Columbus was born in Genoa, Italy in 1451. He later lived in Lisbon, where he worked as a trader. He learned how to make maps and navigate a ship. Christopher Columbus is the explorer who is credited for discovering America. Of course, there were already people living in America at the time who we call Native Americans. There even was a European, Leif Erikson, who had been to the Americas before. However, it was Columbus's voyage that started the exploration and colonization of the Americas. A shortcut to China. Columbus and his brother Bartholomew knew that there were great riches to be had in China and the Indies. However, traveling overland by the Silk Road was dangerous, and a sea route around Africa seemed much too long. Columbus thought he could sail straight to China by crossing the Atlantic Ocean. It would turn out that Columbus was wrong. The earth was much larger than he thought, and there was another land, the Americas, between Europe and Asia. 3 ships and a long voyage. Columbus spent years trying to convince someone to pay for his voyage. He first tried to get King John II of Portugal to pay for his journey, but the king was not interested. Finally, he was able to convince Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain to pay for the trip. He set sail on August 12, 1492, with 3 ships named the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. The voyage was long and difficult. At one point, his men threatened to mutiny and wanted to turn back. They didn't think that he had a good plan. Columbus promised them he would turn back in 2 days if they didn't find land. In his journal, however, he wrote that he had no intention of turning back. Finding land. On October 12, 1492, land was spotted. It was a small island in the Bahamas that Columbus would name San Salvador. He met natives there that he called Indians because he was convinced that he had landed in the Indies. After making his discovery, Columbus was eager to return home to Spain and claim his riches. Only the Pinta and the Nina were able to return to Spain. However, the Santa Maria wrecked off the coast of Hispaniola. Upon returning home, Columbus was treated like a hero. He presented some of the kings he had found, including turkeys, pineapples, and natives he had captured. The king of Spain was pleased enough to fund future expeditions. More voyages. Columbus would make 3 more voyages to the Americas. He explored more of the Caribbean and even saw mainland America. He had some difficulties in being the local governor and was even arrested for his behavior and for mistreating some of the colonists. Columbus died on May 20th, 1506. He died thinking he had discovered a shortcut to Asia across the Atlantic Ocean. He never knew what an amazing discovery he had made.
Amerigo Vespucci was born in Florence, Italy, to a respectable family. He received a good education and worked for the Medicis, a powerful family in Europe. The Medici sent him to Spain in 1491 to prepare ships for voyages. He had developed friendship with Christopher Columbus and became eager to explore the unknown. Along with his knowledge of preparing ships, his education in astronomy, and advice from Christopher Columbus, Vespucci was confident to explore the seas. Spain agreed to fund his voyages. Vespucci's first expedition reached the coast of South America. He continued traveling south along the coast in search of a waterway that he hoped would take him to India. Since he did not find this waterway, Spain thought his voyage was unsuccessful and stopped funding his voyages. However, Portugal decided to support him, and he continued his travels. He came back with stories about how native peoples in their large huts. He believed to have discovered the present-day Rio de Janeiro. With Vespucci's knowledge and interest in navigation, he was able to determine that he had discovered a new land. He used an almanac based on astronomy to figure out the time difference, then distance his ship's location and longitude. He figured there was no possible way it could be in the Indies. Both Vespucci and Columbus had landed in the New World. Columbus thought he had discovered an unknown part of Asia, whereas Vespucci knew that he was in the New World. In 1507, a cartographer named Martin Wallenmuller was working on a map of the world. Since he wanted to include the New World, he suggested naming these new lands America, after Amerigo Vespucci. It was the first map credited that included the new lands, as well as a portrait of Vespucci. Although Vespucci was done exploring, he still encouraged others to adventure into the seas. He became a master navigator in Spain. He recruited and traveled other navigators and prepared a map of the route ships could take when traveling to the New World. That is Amerigo Vespucci.
Go.
John Cabot. Giovanni Caboto was born in Genoa, Italy around 1450, later moving to Venice and becoming a naturalized citizen of that city-state in 1476. He took employment with a Venetian mercantile firm and learned his trade on the Mediterranean Sea, sailing the eastern shores and visiting the fabled city of Mecca, becoming convinced that that was the quickest way to the rich trade of the Far East was by sailing west. He moved his family to London in 1484, changed his name to John Cabot, and petitioned King Henry VII for letter patent to permit him to seek out the way to China. Early voyages. It was not until after Columbus proved the sailing west theory that Henry finally granted Cabot authorization to sail to all regions, countries, and seas in the east, in the west, and in the north. The south belonged to Spain. Cabot wasted no time getting underway and sailed from Bristol in the same year. Before long, he was back due to the foul weather, lack of supplies, and problems with the crew. Taking more time to prepare, Cabot sailed again on May 2, 1497, in the bark Matthew, with 18 men, possibly including his son Sebastian. 5 weeks later, on June 24th, he stepped ashore, raised a cross and banner of the king, and claimed the land for Henry VII. He also discovered cod fishing grounds, which brought wealth to England. Despite finding signs of human habitation, Cabot made no effort to contact them. Instead of returning to Matthew and sailing further down the coast of what may have been Nova Scotia, he returned to England in August without setting foot ashore again. Search for China. Convinced he had landed on the coast of Asia, Cabot set out again on February 3, 1498, with several ships filled with trade goods from merchants in London and Bristol. His exact route is unknown, but he sailed long enough to know that he had not found Asia. Henry VII lost interest in these voyages when he reaped no financial returns. The fate of John Cabot is unknown. He returned to England and probably died shortly afterwards, for there is no record of only 2 payments of his annual pension. It is also suspected that he was lost at sea off Newfoundland during a later voyage.